Prepping, the lost art of the mind, Stoicism, and prepping tenets. So, what is prepping exactly? What am I referring to? Well, this is the preparation of resources internally and externally for certain crises, not being totally reliant on the government for things that we need to live. Essentially, being more self reliant and how we can help others in the process. I feel this is important because things could go wrong. Like, even here in America, where things are seemingly good, things could go wrong, especially today. So we're going to go over some things that I found useful and perhaps getting you thinking about things a little differently. The most important tenet here, just like anything, is actually the mind, which is where it all starts. In the prepping community, there seems to be a huge emphasis on protecting ourselves from others instead of collaborating. The reality is that if we all had the mind to help others out in a crisis, a lot of the prepping information would be obsolete. And I realize it's not yet the world that we live in, so we do need that information. We should simultaneously work toward collaboration. Prepping is not mainly about hoarding stuff and hiding out. It's actually about changing your life so that you can actually create the majority of things you need yourself, or find them locally, so you're not reliant to major corporations and governments that want to control you. The most important thing is actually to train your mind. During a crisis, you're going to want to be mentally prepared. Are you resilient? Can you endure hardship? Start now with various practices and approach to life in general. Doing things like meditation, exercise, fasting, time in nature, heat, cold. All these hormetic stressors that make us much more resilient towards stress. Not only training our bodies, but training our nervous systems and our mind for resilience. Things I've talked about many times on the show. Taking a Stoic approach in philosophy can be useful. Constantly learning and growing in certain areas will let you have a bigger impact. Remember, this is about channeling your energy into things that you can control, accepting the things that you can't, and focusing your energy towards your actions. No one's perfect, but this is a practice, right? Some things we do every day. Sometimes you really gotta have that dog, like stand for freedom at your core. Know what you want and what you stand for. Know what matters and what doesn't. Stand for what is real. That's what freedom is about. Becoming the greatest version of you in health, wealth, relationships, everything. So what's the alternative, right? Essentially, the powers that be know this. And they put their agenda ahead of what is actually real and for the betterment of society. This becomes just more clear over the years. Why do they do this? I don't know. The power is in our hands at the end of the day. Remember that discipline equals freedom. Like the more we can focus on the daily tasks, the daily wins with diligence, like the more freedom we're going to have. Because these small inputs that we put in every day are going to lead to better outcomes, right? Like if we plant seeds, we're going to harvest them at some point. But if we're doing nothing and we're just kind of going the average route, like the Matrix has you playing by a set of rules to be, quote, successful, but ultimately leads you to a path that they told you, which just happens to be average. Sometimes you got to break the rules in order to win. In order to do this, you have to focus on what is real, have standards, have values. Path to freedom is actually within. With all that being said, let's get into some practical prepping tenets. Each one of these is going to be dependent on the amount of time that you're in the crisis, whether it's 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months. So you need to be adjusted accordingly. Number one, focus on your health. Another thing is like prepping for the prepping, right? Like become the type of person that will thrive in a crisis. Being healthy is critical in a crisis because you may have to do a lot of physical work, a lot of things that need to be of use. Also, you won't have to rely on medication or outside things like that, which may not be even available. So learning to apply sleep, nutrition, and exercise tactics that will significantly help you. And chronic disease is going to be purely lifestyle related, which means that there's something we can do about it. It's not about genes. They may have a factor, but we ultimately activate those genes through epigenetics or lifestyle factors. Not being a victim to, quote, our genetics, but actually being an active participant in our own health. Next is self-defense. Learning how to use firearms, martial arts is very important because it doesn't really matter what you have stockpiled because you can't defend it, it doesn't matter. Basic firearms training, your local gun range may be useful. I would recommend a book called How to Shoot Like a Navy SEAL by Chris Sinog, which is like the main firearms instructor, teach you fundamentals. This is a tenet a lot of preppers keep out. They just kind of focus on like all these items that they store, but they don't recognize that people are going to be desperate in these situations, and if you can't defend it, it's kind of an issue. Next is food. When it comes to food, you should consider storage and production. Food storage was solved before we even had electricity. Everything from canning, salting, dehydrating, and much more. There's a lot of resources on this. Storing up the food for a year can be a great start. This will eventually run out though, so then what? Learning to garden and raise livestock is a good idea. Having real fresh food is always going to be better than stored food. Now water. When it comes to water, you want to know how reliable it is, the source that you're getting it from. City water will fail if infrastructure falls apart, right? So storing water in things like water bricks, which is a great long-term solution, they stack on top of each other for easy storage. Having 1 gallon per person per day, having a well is great, but you should know that if the power runs out, it won't work on electricity. Now, your location is also important. When it comes to prepping, this is critical. If you live in a big city, it's going to be a lot harder because there's more potential for things to go wrong. I realize this depends on the city and its personal choice. You may also want to consider the political views of the state because if the country is becoming increasingly divided, in addition, a focus on community is important. Living around the minded preppers could be a great advantage. Also, prep for your current terrain and certain crises that may take place in that region, like certain environmental things like hurricanes or whatnot. Last is community. Now, none really matters if you don't have power of community. It's not going to be done alone. It's the thing that needs to be done together. I mean, this is the glue that holds it all together at the end of the day. Each individual doing their part. A lot of people may change in crisis because of desperation. Desperation leads to poor decisions. So no matter what, operating out of a spirit of abundance is important. It's very important to know the people you're around and if you can trust them or not. Developing a circle of savages who are really about that life. People who you know who are in it to the end. Next, your neighbors matter a lot. What is your relationship with them? Can you develop a synergistic relationship where you help each other out? You can do this with community. You cannot do this alone. So these are just some things that I've learned. I'm not perfect in this. I'm still working and learning a lot. But I think it's important to open our minds to this. We live in a world where, knowingly or unknowingly, we're kind of reliant on the system to get our basic needs. And just kind of moving a little bit in the more self-reliant direction is a great start, I think. That's where I started. And just working towards that with a higher vision in mind, with freedom at the forefront, nothing can stop us. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the show. For more, you can head over to anthonygastella.com for articles, coaching, and other free resources. Also, if you can, leave a review for the show, let people know what you think, and I would appreciate that so much. Support the mission of freedom. Thanks for being on this mission with me, and I promise to give you more powerful, empowering, great content to help transform your life. Thanks for tuning in.